All right, guys, today we got a 2005 Nissan Quest with a 3.5 liter in it. It came to us in pieces. Let's get into it. All right, so a little bit of a story. We've got this one figured out, so we've already diagnosed it. It's not repaired, but it's diagnosed, so I'm gonna walk back through it and show you all the steps that I took to find the problem. So the story is on this vehicle that it wouldn't start. It was a no crank, crank no start originally, and the client somebody started putting parts on it. I think it was the client. Cam sensors have been replaced, crank sensors been replaced, engine module's been replaced. I think that the intake was, for some reason, the intake manifold was taken off of it. I really didn't dig through this box very much, but I mean, we can see there's just the spark plugs are in it. Looks like maybe coils. Yep, coil.
Fuel pump.
Was there something with the fuel pump? I think there was something that he did with the fuel. Oh, yeah, there is a fuel pump in there. Look at there. So anyway, and the engine module was also replaced. The used engine module was put in it, and then he had a locksmith come and program the key to it. So this is the original engine control module. So let's walk out here under the hood. Now, when I got to the vehicle, this cowling, I mean, this is how the cowling was, but there was no engine module in here. It was just empty. The engine module was inside the car, right? So initially what I did was, and I'm not going to walk you through those steps because they're kind of, I mean, it is part of the process because we get the vehicle in here and now we're like, okay, any time if a vehicle just breaks and comes into the shop, it was driving yesterday and it was driving fine, everything was good, and then it just broke, right? It wouldn't start or shut off or whatever. The highest probability is going to be one thing wrong with it, and that's fine. It's usually easy to find. When there's been multiple hands on it and there's been tons of parts thrown at it, all bets are off at that point because we don't know if something that was put in it is creating an issue, a new issue. So I mean, think about this. An engine module was replaced. We had a crank no start. Well, could an engine module that's not programmed correctly cause a crank no start? Absolutely. So we may have the original crank no start problem, and now we may have a new crank no start problem. So what I initially did was I put his original engine control module back in it, and if I remember right, it had security codes in it. So, and I'm sorry guys, I don't remember exactly what it had, but once we kind of got into this thing and we got going with it, we had some people ask for specifically what's wrong with this vehicle. We had some people ask in previous videos to show that problem, and so this was one that had it. So I didn't have all the data. I don't have it, on top of my head, what codes were in there and everything.
We decided to do this video later after
we decided to do the video later. So I think it had security codes in the original module, which this module would have been programmed to the car. I'm not down and dirty into the Nissan thing. If I put a new module in it, can I put it back in it, or does the BCM somehow marry itself to the new module, whatever? I know that the other module would not crank the vehicle or would not start the vehicle, and I know this one went in there, or maybe it wouldn't crank the vehicle, and this one would crank the vehicle. So this is the used module that was programmed by the locksmith. That was a really convoluted way of getting to this is the used module that was programmed by the locksmith. So that's where I started. The vehicle would crank over, it would not start. And then it was just, to me, it was just like, okay, let's just go with the basics, right? So then and even if a vehicle has got, 400, parts thrown at it, if we think about it, it's a crank, no start, all right? Well, we don't need to go down a rabbit hole, trying to figure out, crazy stuff. Let's start with the basics. What do we need for this car to start? We need fuel, right? So we need pressure. We need injector pulse to get the fuel into the engine. We need spark, right? So we need to have our powers and grounds to our coils, just like injectors, a power and ground to the coil. And you know, 3-wire coil, you're going to need, you know, some type of a signal to fire it. You need compression, and we need all of that stuff to happen at the right time. So the reality is, an internal combustion engine, really that's what you need. You need spark, you need fuel, you need compression, and you need it all to happen at the right time. And that car, the engine should start. Of course, you need air also, right? Let me not forget the air part of it, but because I have seen.
They want to say body. Yeah.
Oh, okay. We have seen some crazy stuff where maybe like an air filter be completely blocked up, or have a plastic bag or something in there. So, you know, we do want to check the air portion of it. You guys leaving?
Yeah, we're leaving.
Love you.
Okay.
Wow. Love you, love you, love you, love you. Wow. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Be careful in the rain.
Love you. We're still filming, so love you. Love you. Bye. Alright. Okay.
All right. So yeah, so we need to make sure we have all of that. We need to have spark, fuel, compression, time, and air, obviously. And don't forget about the air stuff. If you hear this thing kind of spinning over weird, I mean, definitely check that stuff. So my go-to kind of thing, and I know that a lot of guys are like, oh, you know, I'm trying to do things fast. So sometimes, you know, on videos, or, you know, you might see some things where other guys are like, I wouldn't do that. But I mean, it's just some things that I do to try to get to answers quickly. So one of the things that I did was, this thing spun over, and, you know, I want to know, do I just have a fuel issue? I mean, there's a fuel pump input in it. Do I just have a fuel issue? I got spark, I got everything else I need, the engine will run. I just take, and this is what I did, pop the air filter cover off, and just had somebody spin it over, and I shot some carb cleaner in here just to see if the engine would fire off. The engine does not fire off. When you do that, it just continues on just like it was. All right, so that tells me it's something a little more than just fuel delivery, right? If it did start up, well, then I basically have cut my, you know, my diagnostic path in half. You know, if you think about it, you know, where I had ignition and compression and timing and fuel and injector pulse and all this stuff. Now if it starts with me shooting some carburetor cleaner in it, or putting some propane through there, well, now I don't have to worry about spark. I don't have to worry about compression. I don't have to worry about time. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. All I got to worry about now is injector pulse and am I getting fuel pressure, right? So it's just a quick way for me to do that. So we did that. The car didn't start. All right. At that point, I went in and I scoped the injectors and the coils. So I'm gonna hook back up to this and show you what I did next, just so you guys can see the pattern. You know what we had on the scope, and can kind of hear the engine spinning over. So give me just a second. Let me get that stuff hooked back up to it, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what we got. Hey guys, real quick before we get back into this vehicle, how about doing me a favor and hit that subscribe button? It really helps the channel out. A lot of you guys aren't subscribed. You're watching the video anyway, just hit it. It's free. Hit that thumbs up button, and also hit that bell notification so you know we're going to have that giveaway. We're getting close to 100K. When we get there, massive giveaway. One of the big items is going to be that ATS e-scan. So hit that subscribe button now. Let's get back in the video. Got everything hooked up, first stage of what I did. So I'm going back through what I did, so you know I'm not skipping anything, so that way you guys, you know, can follow along and know kind of how my brain worked on this thing. So here's what I hooked up. I went in on the coil. I didn't go to a wiring diagram. All I did was go into all three on the coil. So we know one's going to be power, one's going to be ground, and one should be, you know, some type of a signal to you know, activate the coil. We've got our power and our call it the ground side or the control side of the injector, right? One injector. So that's what I did first. And all I'm looking for here is, you know, do we have injector pulse? And do we have, you know, do we have power to the injectors? Do we have, you know, am I missing power somewhere? Do we maybe have some relay, a main relay or something? I'm just trying to get an idea. Again, I'm just kind of going to the basics. This is just how I work, right? So let's go over here. We got it hooked up here. Again, you guys always know I go to the meter screen first just to be sure everything's hooked up. So all of those leads are hooked into a circuit. All right, we're going to start deep record. Go ahead, Dustin. Okay. All right. So we can see, so our white and our blue are on the injector. So let's look at that first. Let's turn off these. So here's our white and our blue. And we can see that we have power going in, but we really don't have anything happening as far as firing the injector, right? One of those should be firing the injector. It looks like we had something maybe try to happen there, but it didn't. It's not firing the injector at all, right? So, okay, so we have no injector pulse. So let's zoom out again. And then if we go in, turn off those two, the other three are on the coil. So we see we have power going to the coil, right? And we definitely have a ground on the coil. I don't know which one's supposed to be the ground. It doesn't really matter. There's the green and the red, right? My gut would be, since looking at it like that, you know, maybe the red is the signal to it, but it really doesn't matter. I can look at this screen very quickly and go, without looking at a wiring diagram, and say, I don't have any type of a, anything happening going to the coil. So it's not being activated. All right, so that tells me right off the bat, really quickly, with, what is that? 5 leads, right? So if you had a 4-channel scope, you could still do this easily. You just were gonna miss one side of the injector probably at that point. No big deal, then you could just jump on it. I just like to get things as quick as possible. But now we know we're not firing the coil and we're not firing the injector, all right? Now I'm gonna bring the mic in real close and I'm gonna have them spin the engine over again. And I want y'all to listen to the engine. Hopefully you guys can hear this. Go ahead. Okay. Go ahead and turn the key off. So if you could hear that, it kind of goes, and we know it shouldn't do that, right? That's a, you know, what we would think is a low cylinder. Okay, well, let's think about that for a second. We got a no start, which is cranking but not starting. We're not gonna have one cylinder causing that. We're going to, you know, one cylinder, if it was a one cylinder dead, it would start and it would just skip, right? But it does kind of give us something to think about. Why isn't that thing turning over normally? Now, don't get down a rabbit hole on this. We don't know what has been done in the past. Maybe somebody has shot, you know, I mean, I put a little bit of carburetor cleaner in this thing, but I don't know, maybe somebody shot, you know, 3 cans of ether into this car, right? And we've got the cylinders washed down or something, and it doesn't have good compression because the cylinders are all dried out, you know, and maybe it'll be fine once it gets to running. So it's just something to have in the back of my head. When it was spinning over, I'm like, well, that just sounds a little off, right? So I did a little research. I went in actually to Identifix, and I found that there were no, I just put in, you know, cranks no start, and I found there were a ton of, I mean, we all know cam sensors are very common on these engines. If you don't, cam sensors and crank sensors are extremely common on these engines. We always replace them as a set, but this is one of those situations where those were already done, right? So, but I saw that there were a ton of the same exact problem with these sensors, right? And with timing issues also. So I said, okay, well, you know, I know he put new sensors in here, but my next go-to is going to be, what do I need to get, what does the engine module need to fire this coil? I mean, we got power to the coil, we got power to the injector. What does it need to fire it? Well, it's going to need a signal in. It's going to need crank sensor and cam sensor. It's going to need the crank sensor to know, you know, to fire it. It's going to need the cam sensor to know when to fire it. So the next thing I did was I got into the engine module and I just back probed the cam sensors and the crank sensor. So let me get that hooked up, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what I found there. And, you know, guys, if you want to see us just you know, plugging things in and back probing and all that kind of stuff, if you're interested in seeing that, if you're interested in how I navigate, you know, to the different screens like an all data, I mean, I know we show it sometimes, but if you guys really want to see that, leave us a comment down below. Let us know, hey, I want to see you guys hooking everything up. I want to see you guys, you know, actually going through all data or Motologic or ProDemand or whatever to find the stuff. Be more than happy to do that. We're just trying to, you know, we want to keep you guys interested, and we want to do what you guys want to do. We don't want the videos to be an hour long if we don't, you know, if we can help it. So, all right, so come on in. Let me show you what we got. I just went in to the powertrain control module. I went into the engine control module and looked at the connector views, right? So that's how I got here. It's got a nice connector view up here, which is exactly what we've got. And Nissan's really nice because actually if you look next to what each terminal is, it shows you a little, not every single one of them, but it does show you, you know, what the pattern would look like on a scope, right? So I mean, that's some really good for those of you that, you know, are new to scopes. Here's a perfect resource straight from the manufacturer that says, hey, this is what this would look like, right? So that's a great resource. I went down, and now initially when I did this, I looked in at the wiring diagram. I saw what numbers went in. Then I came here and just went to the numbers. But you know, rather than showing you guys a wiring diagram and everything, you know what I'm getting to. So I just went in. It's pin 13, pin 14, which are both white. I went in, got into those, right? And then I went into, I think it's pin 33. I kept going, you know, I found the other one, pin 33, right? And I back probed it, which is directly under. Now I will tell you, normally, not every time, but the sensor wires are generally close to each other. So like, you know, these two cam sensor, crank sensor are right next to each other, and then the other cam sensor is directly under it, right? So just be aware that's normally the case, but not always. And sometimes that's not a good thing for us, because then we got to get a whole, you know, if we're trying to get into a bunch of injectors, say, or coils, and they run, let's say it's 6 injectors, and they run 3 injectors and 3 injectors on 2 different rows that are right above each other or below each other. It's kind of hard to get the back probes all in there and get them touching without touching each other. So sometimes it helps and sometimes it's not. But it's all hooked up, and actually if you look, you can see it gives you a pattern of what it would look like. Okay, engine running, engine cranking, and the voltage that it will be, right? It's very handy. It doesn't give you the one thing we needed, but I'm going to get to that. So set this back over here. All right, let's go ahead. Again, went over here, and I did have a couple times that I had to redo that. The blue one and the blue one is still on the injector, and the white one's on the injector, but you can see that it lost connection. I don't care about it anymore. We moved on. So go ahead, Dustin. All right, okay. So forget about the white, forget about the blue. Those are irrelevant. Okay, let's blow this up. First of all, do we have a pattern? Are these things actually doing something? Well, we can definitely see that the crank sensor is doing something, right? The yellow is going to be the crank. This is going to be a cam sensor. This is going to be a cam sensor. So red and green are going to be cam sensors. All right, great. Now, the only thing about this is it's really hard to read this. We need to kind of get in here to line things up. We need to know where things are lined up, and this is difficult to read. Let me show you one thing that is really, really handy to have. If we come right down over here to this all button, right? We hit that, it separates them all out like that, which is a really, really handy thing to have. You can move it around. You can tap on these things over here, and you can move them if you need to. So that's really helpful to do too. But to be able to just separate them all out with one button click, Jeff, awesome, appreciate you. All right, so now we can go down and we can zoom in, and we can kind of see how things line up. All right, so this was the question. This was the thing that somebody wanted to see, somebody asked a question about, is to show cam crank correlation and to show a bad one if we could. Hence the reason we're doing this video, right? We already diagnosed it, but then that question came in, like, well, we got one sitting here we can do. I will tell you that this is out of time, right? And I'm going to show you how we found that out. In order to do that, in order to find out how it's out of time, really, is you need a known good. You can't really do it by, a lot of things we can do by just lining up, like, okay, that fired and then this fired, did those line up, right? These are not like that, because you never know what it's supposed to be until you have a good one. All right, well, I didn't have that in a file. I didn't have one. I should, be very honest with you, and I probably do on one of our machines. We need to get all our machines up to upload onto a Google Doc, and we're gonna work on that. But we'll work that out where they can get the access to that too. Yeah, we're trying to figure something out with that. We did have a comment about that too, where people would like to know that, have access to that, and we're certainly more than happy to provide that. We just got to get the logistics down and you know, make it where people can get into it, but you know, and maybe even add to it. But we just got to be careful, you know, with that. So
there's some things in the works.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. All right.
They didn't hear me wrong.
Okay, yeah, there's things in the works that if we're down the line, but it's a little bit down the line, some surprises. All right. So here's what I did. I went in and I searched for it, and I actually found it on Diagnostic Network, right? So it's a great resource. I came in and we found this, right? So, okay, this is a known good. Now, I know it's a 2006, but it's going to be the same thing. Now, if we look at this, we can see that, and it doesn't matter the colors, all right? So, I mean, I might have the green and the red backwards. It doesn't really matter. What we're looking at is we can see that this bank and this bank, that lines up right here, and it lines up directly over this portion of the little gap in the crank sensor, right? That's our one that we really want to look at because, and that's why the person posted it as this picture, because that's an easy way for us to determine, is this thing out of time? Is anything off on this one? Is anything off on this one? So we've got kind of this as the base, all right? We're here. This one should line up there. This one should line up there, right? All right, let's go to ours. And let's find that spot, right? Let's find those things that are lined up. So, whoops. It took me a minute to figure out, okay, 4, and then 1, and we had a blank, blank, right? And then the one we're looking at, and that took me a minute. So here's 4, there's 1, there's blank, blank, and there's 1. So that's it right there. We can all see that. Let's zoom in over here, and let's take this. I'm going to move it over just a little bit. I'm going to back it out just a little bit just to kind of make it look somewhat like that picture. Kind of.
Yeah,
all right.
You can see it though.
So, let me pan again. I want to really get this right. All right, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, space, here. 1, 2, and then this one, right? So again, we go over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, space, we get that one. 1, 2, we get this one, and it should line up here. Right? So we can see immediately nothing lines up. Let's get our cursors. If we go to that one, it's not lined up. I mean, this isn't rocket science, guys. That one's not lined up with this one, and neither one of them are lined up with the crankshaft, okay? So this is 100% an out-of-time vehicle, and in the research that I did, when I looked it up on Identifix, it said that if it was out of time, that it would be this exact symptom. It may not have spark, it may not have injector pulse, which seems a little weird, but here's the thing is the computer's not seeing when to fire. It doesn't know when to fire it. Sometimes it'll try guessing, but in this case it didn't. It just gave up. This is the way to tell that this thing's out of time without having to get in there. I mean, in the old days, we had to tear the whole front of the engine apart, right, to be able to determine, is this thing out of time? Boy, it was a really sucky day where you really thought this thing was out of time, and you took a whole front of the engine apart, and then you lined everything up, and it all lined up, and you went, oh man, that sucks. Going back together, you know, we could certainly do an in-cylinder pressure transducer on this and see the same thing. It is difficult on Nissan to see that timing being off on a crank no start. If we could get it to run and we had one bank that was off, you can 100% see it on a Nissan, but Nissan is one of the ones that's very difficult on a crank no start to see it out of time by doing an in-cylinder pressure transducer. So this is the easiest way to do it. And if you notice, on this particular one, this module is really easy to get to. It was really easy for me to get to because it was already out and pieces and all that. If we had to do this at the sensors themselves, if this was a module maybe that's buried underneath the dashboard, you know, we'd have to get into these sensors, which are kind of difficult. But you know what? It's a whole lot easier to get to these sensors and get to the crank sensor and do a pattern like this than it is to take the front of that motor apart, right? So this is a good way of doing it. And this just happened to be perfect timing for somebody on one of the scope videos asked to see this. So, you know, I hope this is something you guys, you know, like and can see the power of the scope here and can see how quickly and easily we can diagnose this as a mechanical problem with a scope hooked up to the sensors that the vehicle uses to actually fire, you know, the different components.
With a scope, there might not have been a box of parts in the vehicle.
Oh, 100% with a scope hooked to this. This vehicle would have come in, hey, Royalty Auto Service, you know, my vehicle won't start. I don't know what's wrong with it. Can you guys take a look at it? Sure, we'll take a look at it. This vehicle would have come in. We would have done the same testing we just did. We would have got to that answer, and this thing would have been timing chain, engine, whatever, miles, and all that kind of stuff plays a part in this. But it would have been a pretty quick and easy diagnosis, as opposed to, I don't know how much money is in parts in this thing. I mean, he paid for modules, he paid for sensors, he paid a locksmith to program it, you know. So
I don't know if they can hear me or not, but this is why our testing is valuable, and maybe we can do another video on that.
Yeah.
Because this is not just the standard testing that comes in the shop. We'll talk about that in another video.
Yeah, we can talk about, you know, charging for stuff and why how to make it valuable and how it is valuable, right? So, but this is why we test and don't guess, because a lot of guessing costs a lot of money on this one. So, hope you liked it. If you did, again, hit that subscribe, hit that bell notification, hit that thumbs up, leave a comment, share. Appreciate you. We'll see you in the next one.